There's a concept that I want to kind of get pretty clear in this video, so I'm just going to start out with it. And that is that a myopic eye requires a minus correction because the eye itself has too much plus power. And a hyperopic eye requires plus correction because the eye itself has too much minus power. So a patient who wears a -2 refractive lens, that means that the patient has 2 diopters, too much power for light to fall onto the retina. Too much converging power by +2. And a patient who requires a +2 refractive lens, that would mean that the patient has -2 diopters of refracting power, or 2 diopters too little for the light to fall on the retina. -2. So in this picture, which I've resurrected from the last video, the myope converges light too much so that the focal point falls in front of the retina. The hyperope doesn't converge enough, so the focal point falls behind the retina somewhere. And the emmetrope converges just right. They have just the right amount of converging power in their eye. Okay, let's study a clinical case. Okay, a patient is reading a book held at 20 centimeters. How much accommodation is this patient exerting? Okay, well, remember a very long time ago when we studied vergence, vergence equals 1 over the distance in meters. The vergence power, in this case it's accommodation, is equal to the reciprocal of the distance in meters. In this case we're using centimeters, so we're going to, instead of 1 over, we're going to say 100 over 20 centimeters. So the answer here is 5 diopters. Okay, next case we have a patient that wears a -4 lens. Okay, this patient is a -4 myope. We're testing this patient without any corrective lenses, no glasses, no contacts. And the patient is reading a book held at 20 centimeters. How much accommodation is he exerting this time? Okay, now don't think of this as a math problem. Think of this as a logic problem. It makes sense. I intentionally used the same distance as I did with our first patient, our emmetropic patient. And we learned with the first patient, that patient was emmetropic and they were exerting 5 diopters of accommodative power to read 20 centimeters away, 100 divided by 20. This patient already has 4 diopters of converging power. So they need 5 to read a book held at 20 centimeters. Okay, they need a total of 5, but they already have 4. So common sense tells you they're only exerting 1 diopter in order to read this book at 20 centimeters. Okay, this time we have a patient with an eyeglass prescription of +2. They're a +2 hyperope. This patient is reading without their corrective lenses. If they were wearing their glasses, then they would be considered an emmetrope, an emmetropic patient, and we wouldn't at all consider the +2 or the -4 or anything like that. Just a side note. But the patient is already a +2 hyperope, reading without glasses, a book that is held at 33 centimeters. How much accommodation is this patient exerting? You can probably do it in your head. First, we want to find out, we're gonna find out how much it would take an emmetropic patient to read at 33 centimeters. In other words, we're not going to pay attention to the +2 first. We're going to figure out what dioptric power is needed to read at 33 centimeters for an emmetropic eye. Okay, so that's 100 divided by 33. And we find out it's 3 diopters that's needed. Okay. Now, our patient is already lacking 2 diopters of accommodation, being a hyperope. And look at the picture on the bottom there. Okay, they need to accommodate 2 diopters just to be emmetropic, just to have that focal point on the retina, and then another 3 diopters to read a book held at 33 centimeters. So the answer here would be 5 diopters, the 3 plus 2. Okay, I'm going to go over very briefly go over a couple of tests for measuring the amplitude of accommodation. This should always be done monocularly, although the measurements should be the same in both eyes. So if they're not, and you don't have any good reason why not, such as one of the eyes is diseased or they had trauma to it, just double check. Once in a rare while, they're just not, but most of the time they are. They are the same, but we still test them monocularly. And what we're going to do first is we're going to assume that our patients are emmetropic while I explain these first couple tests. The first test is called the push-up test, and what we do is take a card with a very small print, like a 6-point, and move it closer until it blurs, until the patient can no longer read it. And if it blurs at, let's say it blurs at 12 centimeters, that's the near point. To take the amplitude of accommodation, remember, you divide the near point into 100, and we would round to 8 diopters. So 8 diopters would be the amplitude of accommodation if this blurs at 12 centimeters. Okay, the next test that I'm going to talk about involves a ruler with a card at one end and a +3 lens at the other. That's all it is, a ruler with the card at one end, the +3 lens at the other. It's called a Prince rule. And it's the same idea, except the patient looks through the +3 lens. The card is brought forward until it blurs, okay? And let's say it blurs at 10 centimeters, okay? Divide that into 100, and you get +10 diopters. Now, you already gave that patient a +3 lens at the beginning, so you also have to subtract that +3 from the +10, okay, which leaves 7 diopters of accommodation. Why would I do that? Why would I put a +3 lens in front of my patient? Well, remember that the amplitude of accommodation is a dioptric span. It's not how close the patient can see, it's how much the patient can accommodate from far point to near point. So it's the difference between the far point and the near point. For an emmetropic patient, as soon as the object moves closer than optical infinity, 6 meters, they begin to accommodate. We know where the emmetropic patient's far point is. It's at optical infinity, which is fine if my patient is emmetropic. But what if my patient's far point is at 5.5 meters? Not 6 meters. Well, I don't have a ruler that long to measure the far point. So when I put a +3 lens in front of my patient, look what happens. Now, instead of the focal point falling on the retina, it falls in front of the retina. Our +3 lens has turned this patient into a myope. To be more specific, a -3 myope. And remember in the first video when we compared focal points of the myope, emmetrope, and hyperope? and the myope had a much closer far point, but essentially all the eyes had the same accommodative amplitude. It's just that the myopes, okay, we didn't talk about the hyperope's far point because it's behind the retina, which I'm not going to get into right now. But let's say the emmetrope and the myope had the same accommodative amplitude. It's just that the myope had a closer far point than the emmetrope, and the myope had a closer near point than the emmetrope. What did I just say? Well, this is what I said. I've changed the far point and the near point and moved them closer by making this patient a myope. I added more converging power with that +3 lens, and a myope has an excess of converging power, right? So I made this patient into a myope by adding the power of the +3 lens, and a myope has a closer far point and a closer near point. So all I have to do here is start bringing the card in until the patient can see it clearly, okay? Which for an emmetropic patient should be about 33 centimeters. But as soon as they can see it clearly, wherever it is, that's the far point. Then I'm going to keep moving it closer, and the patient will be accommodating at this point, because remember, anything that's closer than the far point, the patient will need to accommodate to see. And I'm going to keep moving it close. And that's not just the myope, that's any eye. Anything closer than their far point, that's when they begin accommodating. So I'm going to keep moving it closer until the eye reaches maximum accommodation. And I'll know that because a little bit closer, and oh, there's the blur. So as soon as it gets so close that it gets blurry or they can't see it, that's going to be where the near point is. So all I have to do is record the difference between the far point and the near point, and that's the amplitude of accommodation. The next test is called the spherical lens test. Now, if you're still back at our last test, the Prince rule test, don't worry about it. It's not that this is difficult, but it is confusing. It's something you have to go over several times to get it into your head. So if that's where you're at right now, don't worry about it. Just follow along. This might help cement it. The spherical lens test, we're going to do something really similar, only this time we're going to attach a ruler to the phoropter, and we're going to put our patient behind a phoropter. So our patient is behind the phoropter, looking at a card that, let's say it's about 33 centimeters away. He's looking through, we haven't dialed in any prescription, so he's just looking through Plano at this card, and since it's closer than optical infinity and our patient is emmetropic, he is accommodating to read this. Now remember, we're using an emmetropic patient just because it's a little bit easier to explain, but we don't always know. I mean, we know the emmetropic patient's far point is at optical infinity, but we don't always know every patient's far point, okay? So we have to find out the far point, and we have to find out the near point, and the difference between those is the amplitude of accommodation. Then what we're going to do with this spherical lens method is we're going to add plus lenses to aid the patient in accommodating, so that the patient's own accommodative mechanism can relax. The patient doesn't have to accommodate because we're adding the plus for them. We're not moving the card at all, okay? And I'm going to go step by step through this process. We're just going to add more and more plus. So we added our first plus lens, and the additional converging power of that lens aids the eye's own crystalline lens, in bringing the focal point closer. So the eye can relax its accommodation a little bit because it has that additional power of the plus lens. It can relax its own plus lens a little bit and still have the focal point on the retina. So then we add a stronger plus lens. And again, the same thing happens. The eye has to relax so that we could see the image clearly, because that plus lens is converging the light so that the focal point is coming more and more in front of the retina. So the eye's own accommodative mechanism has to relax to allow that to fall back onto the retina. And we just keep doing that, adding more plus power. Again, we're not moving the card at all. We're just adding more plus power. And we're just going to continue to do that until the patient cannot focus. It's blurry now. And the reason the patient can no longer focus is because the patient can't relax the ciliary muscle anymore, can't allow that lens to flatten any more than it already is. And that's how we know that we've reached the far point. Far point? Did I mean to say far point? Yes, I did mean to say far point. The accommodative mechanism is fully relaxed at this point. The eye, and the reason that I put this cross section of the eye as I'm describing it, is because I want you to see that the eye is doing the same thing as if there were no phoropter, and I was standing in front of the patient holding a card, and they were looking at it and accommodating to look at it, and then I started walking backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards, and kept walking backwards as they're focusing on that card, and kept walking backwards until they could no longer see it. Their eye would be accommodating less and less. The lens would be getting flatter, and the ciliary muscle relaxing and relaxing. The eye is doing the same thing, even though my card isn't moving. The lens is causing the eye to do the same thing. So that's how we're measuring far point in this case. Now, once we've got that, then we do the near point. And we measure the near point by doing the same thing, only this time we're going to add minus lenses. We don't have to move the card when we have the use of lenses. And before I explain this one, and I will, because I know this whole thing is a little bit confusing. Before I explain this one, let me just say it's really important to do the far point first, okay? Because what we're doing in measuring the far point is relaxing the accommodative mechanism. And sometimes once the eye is fully accommodated, it's hard to get it to completely relax. So we start out trying to completely relax it, and then we'll get it to completely accommodate as much as it possibly can, and then some. Which is kind of the same reason why when we focus things on an instrument like the keratometer, we're not supposed to go back and forth when we're focusing our own eyepiece, because what we're doing is causing accommodation and then relaxation and then accommodation, and eyes don't always fully relax once they're accommodated. It takes a little bit more time. It's a muscle. We're going to start out where we left off, which was that the light came to a point in front of the retina. The accommodation was fully relaxed in the eye, and then we add our first minus lens. Now, minus lenses diverge light rays, so the light rays are widened up a bit before they hit the cornea. And they still come to a focal point, but now there's less converging power. Well, they start out more diverged. So the focal point is pushed behind the retina, which creates blur for the patient's eye, and blur, of course, is the stimulus to begin accommodating. So the eye accommodates, pulls the focal point back onto the retina. And then we add more minus, pushing the focal point farther behind the retina, and then the eye accommodates a little bit more to pull it back. And this continues until the eye can no longer accommodate any farther. It's fully accommodated. We add just a touch more to make sure. And then that's recorded as the near point. Now, the accommodative amplitude is the difference between the far point that we got with the plus lenses and the near point that we got with the minus lenses. That's the accommodative amplitude. Okay, there's a lot more to this whole subject, even if we're just touching the surface, but I think it's one of those things that has to be digested in small pieces. So I'm going to stop here. I'm just going to throw in one fun thing, a clinical case, just something to kind of give you some food for thought. Okay, we have a patient that comes in, and this is his prescription. He's a minus 175 plus 25 at 180 in the right eye. In the left eye, he's a minus 150 plus 50 at 180. And his add power is a plus 175. Now, he has no trouble reading, but he's having a little trouble seeing when he's driving in the distance. So upon refraction, we decide we can now prescribe a much stronger distance lens. So now we give him a minus 3 plus 25 at 180 and a minus 275 plus 50 at 180. And we up the add power to plus 2 1/4. But there's a problem because our patient comes back 2 days later complaining that the distance is great. He has no problem now. He's really happy when he's driving. He can see all the road signs, but he's having a lot of trouble reading. Everything gets blurry right away, and he really feels like he's straining. So what did we do wrong? Well, we increased the reading add for the patient, so he should be able to read better. It should be magnifying more than it was. But take a look at the total prescription. This patient went from a minus 175 sphere in the right eye to a minus 3. And that's a change of 1 1/4 diopters. And he went from a minus 150 in the left eye to a minus 275, another 1 1/4 diopters. So before, the patient was under minused by 1 1/4 diopters. Okay? He already had that much converging power. Think of the picture of the cross section of the eye. He was under minused. His eyes were converging too much. The focal point was in front of the retina already by 1 1/4 diopters. And then you add that to his add power that he had, 175, and he had a full 3 diopters of power to read with. Okay? We took away his 1 1/4 diopter of minus. We put that focal point right back on the retina. It's not converging in front of the retina anymore. And we only gave him 2 1/4 power of reading. He was used to 3. So, regardless of age or anything else, he's used to 3. We got to give him back his 3. So all we really have to do here is change the add power to a plus 3, what he was used to and what he could see with.